How's it going, everyone? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. People have been asking me for a while now to do a bit of a review of my CCVM still. They are specific questions, you know, what do I like about it, what I don't like about it, so on and so forth. So today I thought I'd do a little bit of a review of the still. First of all, I'm going to walk through exactly what the still is, how it's put together, you know, all the different parts. And then second, I want to go back and talk about each of those parts individually and say if I'd change anything. Cool? Welcome Distiller everyone, I'm Jesse and this is the channel all about chasing the craft of home distillation and making it a legitimate hobby. So if you're into stills guys, if you're thinking about buying a still, if you're thinking about getting into distilling, or you're already there, this is probably the channel for you. Make sure you subscribe down below. I put videos out every week so you won't miss anything. Alright team, I get lots of comments or questions or messages or whatever every week asking about my still and whether or not it would be the right thing for that person to build. So today I figured I'll make a video about it, and then when people are asking me those questions I can direct them to something with a little bit more substance than a 30-second reply. Oh! I almost forgot guys, if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to drop some still porn, some slow-mo stuff down there as well, so check that out too if you're interested. Let's get stuck right into it guys. At the bottom of the still I have a 50-litre beer keg that has been converted to run as my boiler. It's got two 2-kilowatt elements in it at the moment, but I have the port sizes there to go up to two 4-kilowatt elements if I so choose. An extra 4-inch port has been put in the top for cleaning, and I am currently using the standard 2-inch ferrule that comes standard on all the stock on all the beer kegs to attach to the column. Sitting on top of the column I have 60 centimeters of copper pipe at 2 inches, and that is when I'm running in CCVM mode, packed pretty much to the brim with copper wool. A new addition to the still is the 4-inch cycler, which at the moment sits at the top of the column and under the CCVM head. At the moment it's there mostly just for aesthetic, so we can see what's going on the inside, and that came from Scuba Steve. So thanks a bunch, Scuba Steve. On top of the sight glass I have a stainless steel T. Above that sits the little extension for the CCVM coil to go inside, and I bent my CCVM coil myself out of copper tubing. On the other side of the stainless steel T I have a copper elbow which leads to my 50 centimeter shotgun condenser. Below that I have a janky homemade reducer that essentially just funnels the product into the collection jars. The Reflux condenser and the product condenser are on two separate water loops, so I'm not sending the same water through both condensers at the moment. And when I put the thing into pot still mode, all I really need to do is take the sight glass off, take the packing out if I choose to, I've run it with it in there as well, take the coil out of the top and cap the top with a blank like this with one of the tri-clamps. Alright, so now that you know what I'm running and what I have on the still, let's get into talking a little bit more specifically about each of those parts. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is building a modular still, or buying a modular still, and I cannot recommend this enough. It totally does bump the cost of the still up a little bit, but putting it all together with ferrules like this, which then clamp together with these, means, like I said before, that you can switch things in and out as you wish. You can build extra parts, you can buy extra parts. Basically you can build yourself a big old Frankenstein still that has so much more versatility than if you just soldered or welded everything together at the beginning. People are always asking me where to buy these things from, and actually guys, what I'll do is I'll put some links for most of the stuff down below, the stuff that you can buy, and if you don't want to build it yourself, if you do want to build it yourself, these are probably one of the few things that I would recommend just going out and purchasing. Alright, next let's go back down the bottom to the boiler. Now I absolutely love this boiler. I love it to bits, and it was actually made for me by the guys at IMHO Distillery, so thanks again for that guys. But the reason I love it is that A, it has enough volume to give me enough room when making cuts and so on and so forth. If you're trying to make cuts on a smaller boiler, the smaller the boiler gets, essentially the lower your resolution gets between cuts. For me, 50 litres is about perfect. If I want to put more in there, I can do stripping runs, you know, so I can make a 150 litre wash, do 3 stripping runs, put it all back together, and end up with 30 or 40 litres in the boiler, essentially turning that boiler into a 150 litre boiler, which is pretty freaking cool, right? Other reason I love it is for that 4-inch portal at the top to fill and clean with, that sort of stuff. It's great just being able to get my big ass fat forearms into something and just be able to scrub it out a little bit, and also to have a much larger target to tip things into. I'm stoked to have an electric boiler. I think it's just easier. It's plug and play rather than worrying about running out of propane, and I do like the added safety side of it too, not having naked flames around this thing, which is you get it. The other thing which you put onto the boiler, which I would absolutely recommend, is a drain port, and that drain port is centered right in the middle of the keg and extends out to the side of the keg, so you can empty it where it sits if it's up off the ground or you've got a hose attached to it or whatever. But having that port in the middle of the keg means that you can drain the thing bone dry. You don't have like a little reservoir sitting below where your drain port sits. Anyway, moving on to the copper column. Now 60 centimeters for me, it's right on the edge of being okay. I would like probably at least another 30 centimeters on top of it, and I will get an extension for it at some point in time. You can get away with it though, so I can fairly easily make 93-94% booze, but I can't get that extra couple of percent with it. So that's up to you guys. The other way that I may be able to improve that is to swap the copper wool out for like SPP or something like that. I just haven't done that yet. I'm happy so far with the copper. It's nice having extra copper in there as opposed to just all stainless. But I'll let you make your own decision on that. It's a perfectly serviceable option in my opinion. So the sight glass itself, like I said, at the moment that is just purely for aesthetics, and it does look pretty freaking dope, I must admit. But going forward, I'm going to be able to do other things with that. It's nice that it's 4 inches, so if I do move to a 4-inch column later on, I've got that versatility. It just fits in with everything else. I can also turn it into a gin basket. I could also put a plate in there, bubble plates on it. That would be pretty cool too. So there is options with that, but it is one of those things that you don't have to have it. Do you know what I mean? Alright, now let's talk about the CCVM build. But before we move on, I've got to say a huge thank you to the Still It Patreons that are essentially the ones that are ensuring this channel continues to grow, ensuring that this channel keeps on doing new things and keeps moving forward. So thanks a bunch, guys. There was actually something pretty cool happened a few days ago. Still It got to 1 million views in total. Blows my mind. So thanks to everyone in the Still It community, everyone that watches videos, of course, guys. I cannot say a big enough thank you enough to everyone, but an extra special thank you to the Still It Patreons. Why did I go CCVM and not go Bokeh or something else like that? First of all, it was basically because I was pretty tight on cash back then when I first set the Still up. There was no budget for Still It. It was my hobby money, and there wasn't a whole lot of that kicking around at the time. It was cheap, there was fewer parts, and most important, you do not need a valve for it. Those things can get really, really expensive if you're making sure that you don't use anything but PTFE in them, and you want something that's, does the job properly and it has a good amount of adjustability on the valve. Second of all, I was totally new to brazing at the time, so there's a lot less work to do on making a CCVM column than there is for something like a Bokeh, or going into, if you're going into a flute or any of the vapor managed stills. It was something that was basic. It was something that was going to be relatively simple to run, not necessarily easy, but simple to run. And all of those things put together just led me down the CCVM path. If you are interested in this, guys, I would thoroughly recommend checking out the threads on Home Distiller about it. 3000, Dad 2000, I think is his name on there. He didn't, as I understand it, create this design, but he was the one that really pioneered it and got it sort of gaining traction in the home distilling world. So check those threads out. There is a whole lot of awesome information in there. So let's take just a few seconds to talk about how the CCVM head works and why it's so simple. Shall we? Alright team, so the vapor comes up through the still here, and it has two options. You can let it go over into the line arm and down into the product condenser, or it's going to come and hit the reflux condenser and be set back down the column, causing reflux through the copper wall, mixing with the vapor coming back up. So the way that a CCVM works is that you have a coil put in the top here, and by adjusting the height of the coil you can adjust the reflux ratio, which is essentially how much of the vapor coming up you're sending back down through the column to reflux, and how much you're sending through the line arm down into your cuts jars on the bench. So the still's actually running right now, so I can't just pull the coil out to show you. Pretend this is the coil. If I want to run in full reflux, sending everything back down the column, I lower the coil down until it essentially completely blocks off this part of the T. Now it doesn't block it physically, it just means that the vapor gets cooled and condenses and falls back down before it reaches this point. As I lift it back up, I can start allowing a little bit of the vapor to head that way, but most of it's getting sent back down. And if I get to the point where I bring it up solidly above that T, essentially what's happening is you're getting 50-50 reflux, and that is one of the problems with this still, is you can't get less than 50-50, or you can't send more than 50% of the vapor over to your cuts jars. If you're doing sort of high percent stuff, that's never an issue. So essentially all you're doing, guys, is adjusting the height of the coil up and down to decide how much vapor you're wanting to send that way. Now, like I said before, I made my coil out of copper and I did wind it. Unfortunately, I'm sorry guys, I didn't make a video on that. That was back before I even started making videos. But maybe at some point in time I will make another one, because that one is a little janky. I'd like to replace it at some point in time. Doing so, making a coil out of copper can be a little bit daunting. It is relatively easy to kink the hose and also get blockages inside the hose if you're packing it with something to stop it from kinking. Luckily, I didn't get either of those problems the first time I did it, but I have seen plenty of comments on forums and stuff that say, you know, just that. On the other hand, if you don't want to make it out of copper for those reasons, I have seen a lot of people make them out of flexible stainless gas tubing. I can't say a whole lot about it. I've never tried it. I've never seen one in person, but the guys that do it do say that they've got great results from it, and without the hassle of the bending the copper. So check that out too if you're interested in it. So in general, I love the CCVM. Don't get me wrong, guys. It's really, really amazing. I'm really glad I went this way. It got me into the hobby much faster than any of the other options would have, unless I just had the cash to buy something outright. The only issue I see with it, is that it can be a little bit finicky to get your reflux ratio correct with raising and lowering the reflux condenser in relation to and getting the vapor speed right with the amount of energy you're putting into the boiler down below. Now, it's by no means a big problem. Don't get me wrong, guys, it's really not, but it can be a little bit finicky. Like yesterday when I was running it, it took me, I think, 3 or 4 tries to get it just where I wanted it. I was out of practice, I hadn't done it in a while. That to me really, guys, is the only downside to the CCVM thing. It's a little bit of an art and not an exact science about how it works, for me anyway. All right, moving on over to the little line arm and the elbow there. I mean, it is what it is. It does the job perfectly. And below that comes the product condenser. Now this, guys, I am really happy that I went with a shotgun condenser. It saves so much on space and it gives you so much knockdown power to really just kill that vapor, condense it back down into liquid and have it popping out the end cool. Even when I'm running stripping runs with 4 kilowatts going into the boiler, I don't have to run a massive amount of water through the condenser, and I can always hit, 20 degrees Celsius dripping out the end of the pipe or pouring out of the end of the pipe for a stripping run. It's just not an issue. If you're going to buy one of these, guys, they can get pretty pricey. If you're going to build one, they can get really finicky, especially if, like me, you don't know what you're doing with brazing or welding or whatever. If you want to see the frustration that I went through to get this thing set up, there is a video for that, so I'll stick a card up top for it. But guys, honestly, if I can get one of these things together, you can too, and I really think you'll appreciate it. It's pretty cool. I think that's all I have to say really about the actual parts of the still that I've got right now. The reducer at the end, like I said, is janky. I've also got a video of me making that. The reason I made it is because it was expensive to buy a copper one here in New Zealand, and I wanted to use it as a practice to learn to braze before I tackled the shotgun condenser. So let's take a little step back and talk about the build as a whole, everything about it. Would I recommend someone going out there and getting started with a 2-inch CCVM still? hell yes. For all the reasons that I listed before, it's cheaper than a Boca to build yourself. It is much cheaper than going out and buying a ready-made still, and let's face it guys, options for those depending on where you live can be pretty limited or expensive when you factor in shipping and all that sort of stuff, and other people will have other advantages that I don't have to worry about here in New Zealand for building your own as well. It doesn't have the valve of a Boca, so it makes it cheaper, and it is simple to run. There's not a lot of thinking, there's not a lot of worrying about having valves in the vapor path and that sort of stuff. So I would thoroughly recommend it. The one thing that I'm thinking of upgrading sooner rather than later might be to go to 4 inches or even 3 inches rather than 2 inches. And essentially what that does, guys, is it gives you speed. So much more speed. If you saw the video that I put out last week, I'll put a card up top for that as well. Essentially I was talking about how if I do a full charge of low winds on this boiler, it takes me, you know, sort of 12 to 14 hours to run the thing, which is not easy to do. If you step up to a 4-inch column, I don't know the numbers that well, but I'm guessing, put me right if I'm wrong guys, I'm guessing I'd probably get that down to 4 hours, I think. The height of the column gives you the purity or the higher ABV, and the width of the column gives you the speed that you can run it at. You will, however, need much more power down below, so I don't think that 2 4 kilowatt elements will do me enough justice for a 4-inch column, so I'll have to look at stepping those up to 2 4 kilowatt elements as well. But if you're looking to get into the hobby and you don't know where to start, this, in my mind, is the best way to go. Hands down the best way to go. And if you build it with tri-clamps and make it modular, you can switch parts in and out later on as you wish. Anyway team, one more really important thing before I check out that a lot of people ask about with this build before they get started or when they're new to looking at it. And let me get back up top there and I'll tell you about it. So many people ask me, how do you block this space at the top to stop the vapor getting out the top of the still, because obviously we don't want that, right? The short answer is, guys, is you do not need to. As long as you have enough knockdown power, enough cooling coming from your reflux condenser, any vapor that gets anywhere near the top is just going to condense and fall straight back down the column. Now I know that seems a weird thing. We've got vapor inside here that's sort of got pressure or movement velocity going up towards the top, and we're not capping it, and yet somehow the vapor's not coming out the top. Just trust me guys, it works, it really does work. Anything that gets anywhere in the top of this column will condense back into liquid, and then the liquid is not going to defy gravity and you know, float out the top. It's going to fall straight back down the column exactly where you want it. But if you're going to run it as a pot still, you are 100% going to need to cap the top of this thing, and I'll explain to you what I do because I can't take it apart now, but here we go. It's super simple guys. The coil comes out of the top, this extension here is removed, and this cap, this blank, goes in its place right there, and this tri-clamp holds it back together. I hope that sheds a little bit more light on my setup on CCVMs and what I think about stills like this, and I hope that makes your decision on what you're going to make, what you're going to build, what you're going to buy a whole lot easier. Anyway team, I've had a blast. I'm sorry that it's taken so long to get here, I really am guys, but can't wait to hear what your thoughts are on these stills, on these topics. Drop some comments in the comment section down below here on YouTube. I'd love to see those. If you liked the video, make sure you hit the like button for me. That helps out a whole lot. If you really liked the video, make sure you're subscribed down below. And if you want to help the channel out and you don't know how to do it, there's 3 things you can do. Number 1 is find some people that you think might like this video and share it with them. That would be awesome. Number 2 is you can check out the merch down below this video, potentially if you're in America. If not, there is a link to the page that sells them. And number 3 is if you really love what you're seeing here guys and you'd like to help ensure that still it keeps growing, check out the Patreon page and see what that is all about. Anyway team, that's enough talking for today. Keep on chasing the craft guys, and I'll see you next time. See ya.